Welcome to season 11 of the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast. This is where we chat with experts in the field, patients who use these devices, physical therapists, and the vendors who make it all happen. Our goal is to share stories, tips, and insights that ultimately help our patients get the best possible outcomes. Tune in and join the conversation. We are thrilled you are here and hope it is the highlight of your day.
Hello, everyone. My name is Joris Peels, and this is another episode of the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast with Brent Wright. How you doing, Brent?
Hey, Joris. I'm doing well, man. I got to say, this daylight saving things, I don't know if you know about this, but it just messes with your circadian rhythm or something. I don't know.
For me, it messes with my schedule because I don't every year, and then I think it's States does it first or something. Then you guys all change, and then all my appointments end up getting wrong, and then I'm always like out of it for like, I don't know, 2 weeks or something. And then we in Europe also do it or something like that. It's just, oh God, I hate it. Every year it's just so annoying. So, but we didn't kind of nearly miss not starting our podcast today because we don't know how the world works.
Well, and the schedule thing is a real thing. So not only the daylight savings, but I remember just a few weeks ago, I was in a different time zone and I set the time that I was supposed to be, and I thought I set it for Eastern time, but it set it at Central time, which pushed my schedule back, so I totally missed the appointment because of the time zone that I was in, even though I was like trying really hard to be conscientious of that, but it is what it is. So yeah, there you go. We now have more hours of daylight, but it's dark in the morning.
Yeah, and I still don't understand. Or we should all do it together or something like that. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? This is the beginning of a new season, right?
It's the beginning of the new season. And I'd love to just reflect a little bit on the previous season, but then just share with you a couple data points that I find very interesting. We've added a few more countries. So we're up to 113 countries in the world.
Crazy, dude. Yeah.
So it just goes to show that there is a hunger for education around orthotics and prosthetics and a curiosity around what we do. Some of the highest performing episodes was the very first one that we did, which was a day in the life of a prosthetist and orthotist. And then actually the second one too, why do a podcast around the digitization of the field of orthotics and prosthetics? And then what's interesting is, I don't know if you remember Diego, we talked about high flow with him. He was a technician for Bionic. Yeah. I don't know how old his episode is, but his episode is in the top 5, and I don't even think it's a year old. And so I think that's pretty cool. But here's really the funny part, and I rib him sometimes. We had our first listenership from Querétaro, Mexico, which is where he's from, right? So, it probably like the parents, in-laws, all the things. So I thought that was funny, but so that was fun. But so, and then just for, a lot of people ask, well, what does a typical month or 7 days look like? This week, last 7 days, we've had 307 downloads. For the last 30 days, we've had 1,050 downloads. And the last 90 days, 2,650. And then all time, we're almost to 27,000 downloads. And, for a niche little industry, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think it's also, we're just doing this for us, essentially. and like the fact that other people like this, and then... I think it's really cool. It's really good. We didn't know if we could find anyone on this thing. We didn't know if we could, you find an audience or something. So the fact that some people are listening is really, really good.
Yeah, and I recently went to the Academy show in Atlanta, and it was pretty interesting. I was able to talk to a few people, and I had multiple people come up to me and say that they really appreciated the Prosthetic and Orthotic podcast. And they loved the format, hearing the stories. And so I think it really resonates with people. And I think the other thing is, not that it's when we have a guest, they're obviously our guest, but we don't shy away from some of the hard questions too. And I can honestly say that my mind, after interacting with some of our guests, has changed. So, for instance, when we had the Josh from Limber on, I really didn't know how that was going to go, where it was going to go. Are they actually doing something that's clinically relevant? How are they getting there? And Josh did a wonderful job presenting, their focus problem, what they're trying to solve, how they're trying to solve it, and keeping patients in the center, right? So Josh was an engineer, but patient outcome was critical and clinical relevance was critical. And I got to admit that my mind was changed on what Limber was doing. And I think that's neat. So to have that discussion, the discourse, and be able to kind of open your mind, I hope that's what some of our listeners will do as well as they're coming along the journey.
Totally, dude. I think it's great. I think, always our first and second episode are going to be more listened to, of course, because then people stream in one episode and then try the first two. It's kind of bad because then we're kind of learning it. So maybe they're not as good as the later on stuff. But I love that the high flow is really specific. And I love that you're learning as well because of this. I mean, and I love that you're changing your mind because that's what it's all about. To just say, oh, I used to think this and now I think this plus this, or I think, Y instead of Z. I really like that, dude. I think that's really good. And I do think people learn from this, and even if it is just different perspectives, if they completely disagree with everything we're saying, maybe then it's just a different way of thinking about it than they have. So I think that's really very, very valuable, I think.
Yeah. Cool. I think, especially in the world that we live in, and maybe it's just the US, but the civil discourse or the, ability to sit down with somebody that may think different than you in a myriad of ways, is starting to get lost. And the, so many people, their answer is, I just disagree with it. But they just disagree. It's like they just shut down and won't listen or be a part of, hey, let me put myself in their shoes. What are they thinking? What are they doing? And, if we can help that in any way, specifically around some of the stuff that's coming down the pike in prosthetics and orthotics, I think it's a big win.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, so first off, do we have a sponsor? Right? Do we talk about the sponsor?
Yeah.
Then we need to do that real quick.
Yeah.
Who's our sponsor?
So Structure is our sponsor for, they actually ended up the last 3 episodes of the season. They were our sponsor, and we just thought that it would be really cool to bump them into the beginning of this season. They've been good to us, and we just believe that scanning is foundational to getting a good patient outcome. And I know that you say the same thing, but this is a super budget-friendly option to get going with something that is a known, and that is very applicable to the prosthetic and orthotic thing. You want to have a known dimension, known scan, and I think Structure is doing all the right things to make sure that we get a scan that's worthwhile using and ultimately creating a great patient outcome.
Yeah, totally cool. And I think the really unique thing is about Structures, they're really seeing this as kind of a Lego block that fit into other stuff. So if you want to, have 100 stores and you want to put your SKU scanning solution, all the Nike towns or whatever, if you're Nike, or if you have a network of 10 clinics and you want to make it really easy, fast for your staff and your patients kind of foot scanning solution or whatever it is you want, I think this is a building block of technology you can build on top of, or build your solution on top of. I think that's just the really exciting bit. I mean, to use a fully fledged scanner would also work, but it'd be really expensive per scanner. And to use the time of flight sense or whatever, that kind of thing would be really, really, really difficult. So this is kind of like a middle of the road kind of thing where it's the right price point and it's accessible enough for you to really build either, you want your own little weird solution you're going to invent, or you want to do something for a big network of stores or something. Yeah, I think it'd be the totally the thing I turn to.
Yeah, well, and just like in our conversation with Ravi, the CEO, I mean, they spend, this is their life, right? The software side and vision side of this. And most of these other people, it's a side gig for. And so that's, I think, one of the things that's attractive to Structure is like, this is what they do, and they have really talented team doing it. And it's accessible. So I think all those things make a great combination.
That's super cool, dude. All right, really good. And so I know you want to talk about some news, some stuff that's been happening, some stuff that you find exciting in the world of OMP.
Yeah, well, after Filament Innovations got bought by Proteer, I was like, I wonder what the next shoe to fall is, right? And pretty much right before the Academy meeting, Hanger made an announcement that they were going to buy Coapt. And it's an interesting acquisition because Coapt, they are into pattern. It's called pattern recognition, but they essentially have these algorithms, sensors, and such that can predict human movement and get data from it. And so a lot of people will use this for some of the hands, like the psionic hand that we saw, the open and close, that sort of thing. But the neat thing about pattern recognition is that instead of just two sensors, they have a network of sensors together, and you can actually train the computer that's built on board what motion that you are doing, and that array takes a look at all the signals and then processes that into a signal that it thinks that you're doing. So the reason why this is important is if you only have two sensors, you can pretty much only do one thing at a time, open, close, but if you want to rotate your wrist, then you have to send what we call a co-contraction. So two signals to both sensors, and then you have to send another signal to rotate the wrist. Well, whereas with Coapt, you can do, hey, this is my closed hand, this is my open, and this is my twisting. This is the way that I want to move the thumb. And there's no signal to create the next thing that you want to do. And I think that is really neat. And I think the other thing that's interesting about this acquisition, and again, I know nothing about all this. It's just pure conjecture, right? So Coapt did not have a billable L code until just about a month ago. And so now that they can bill it, and it says, so now it actually becomes an asset. It's people that's not veterans or workers' comp that can get it. It's actually covered by our government insurance, which is Medicare, which then other insurance companies will follow. And the reason I think that is, very interesting, because now it becomes an asset, and there will be more utilization of that. And Hanger has a whole upper extremity program where they actually have specialists that fly around the country fitting these upper extremity, because they're fairly rare when you're looking at the scope of people that have upper extremity amputations. And we'll get into that in a second. But I think that the other interesting part of this, do you remember when we talked about Equal acquiring Tasca, which was the hand?
Yeah.
So what's interesting is Tasca was distributed, and again, I don't know anything about this, I'm just outside looking in, distributed by PhilHour. Well, PhilHour got bought by Hanger, and then Equal bought Tasca, the hand, which kind of takes it out of Hanger. So I think Hanger knew they had to move quickly, or that technology was going to get pulled off the market by a competitor. And so I think they did. And I think it's a good move. Not only does it add to their portfolio of things, but it also allows them to vertically integrate some of the upper extremity stuff, which is typically the most expensive types of prostheses to make. So to have this technology in and be so far ahead of the competition, I think is a very great thing.
So it's this Coapt stuff. Guide me through this a little bit. So normally, where it used to be, let's say, imagine a couple of years ago, I get this myoelectric arm. right? And what would I do? I would be able to make a muscle twitch to make something happen, right?
Right.
But I'm super limited. Is that it? I just have like 3 gestures, or I have 3 or is it about fine tuning that gesture? Is it about now I can pick up just not a mug, but I can also pick up like a crystal glass or something really delicate? Is it about both those things? Is it about like, more gestures and more ways of control, or even a third thing, more different ways of controlling? Or is it more about more precision control or learning faster, or kind of all that? What is it? What are we talking about here?
I think it's all that. And I think that the way that you described it, so just imagine, when the typical myoelectric sensors, what we'd say is you put the one sensor is like, if you were to close your wrist, that goes on the belly of the muscle, on the bottom of your arm, say below your elbow. And then you put the other sensor on the top. So if you move your wrist back and forth, you can feel both of those muscles going. So what traditionally happens is, if you want to open your hand, you have to fire the muscles on the backside of your arm. If you want to close your hand, you fire it on the other side. And then if you want to do something else, go into a different gesture, you actually have to move your hand in a funny position, hold it, and then listen for a click, and then you can move it via those sensors again, but it's not a natural motion. So like to twist your wrist around, it may be that you make a gesture and then you have to fire the muscle that opens your hand, and then that twists your arm around.
So it's slow.
Well, yeah, and you have to think about it. With Coapt, what you do is you have, instead of 2 sensors, you have an array of 18 sensors that go across your hand. And when you train this, and so you can say, hey, this is how I close my hand. And it looks through the array and says, this is a closed hand signal. And then you say,
okay.
I'm going to open my hand. And it says, this is an open hand signal. And I'm going to twist my hand. And you do that gesture. And so it knows that this is the twisting motion. And so what's great about that is there's still delay just because of the electronic, but you're not having to do these unnatural motions to get the action that you want.
Okay. So it's faster, more intuitive, I guess. But also, I can imagine walking from one place to the next, then having to plan that you're going to get to a door, and then you have to plan to do, a twitch, a click, a wait, and then you open the door. Yeah, that could not be cool. That'd be super uncool. And then now doing it much more intuitive, much natural, I guess, or controlling this thing in a much easier way. I think that'd be really benefit, let's say.
Yeah. And you wouldn't believe this, Joris.
Yeah.
We might be getting the CEO on in just a few minutes.
That's super cool.
But we'll keep on going.
We'd love that. But and the next thing is about this Coapt thing. What do you think? Do you believe, just you then, there's 2 ways that Hanger could do this. They could have this new product. Well, 3 ways really. They could roll out the new product with all the Hanger people internally, or they could continue and use their power, let's say, to roll it out much more in the world, or they could, completely take it to themselves and take it their own little private thing. Only go to Hanger for this. Well, what do you think they'll do, or what do you think they should do?
That's a good point. I didn't even think about bringing it all internal.
It could be. I mean, it could happen. I mean, companies do this. GE and Additive did this with the Morris Technologies and with Concept Laser. Right? It essentially brought a lot of it internal. But it could happen. I mean, usually strategically, the people are argue against this, unless in the electronics business or a lot of these guys do this all the time. They're just like, oh, your whole company is now a feature on my phone.
Yeah. So I think the interesting thing about all this is the prosthetic market has now become international. And Hanger is not international. I mean, I guess they kind of are now through some of their manufacturers, like a Phil Hour, and maybe some of their other acquisitions. I can't think of it offhand. But you see all this international money coming into the U.S., and the U.S. is it's interesting because the U.S. was the market to get into because things paid, and I still think that's the case. But a lot of that money would stay within the borders of the United States. And now that money is leaving the borders and fortifying some of these other international players. So, that's it's an interesting dynamic that we won't know the consequence of, or, good or bad, what's going to happen when all that money gets pulled off the shore. Because like a company like an Equal, Oser, Autobach, now they're only they pay rent and payroll. And the rest of the money can get pulled out of the United States to do whatever, research and development, line the coffers, whatever it is. And so it's just an interesting inflection in history for that. And I think Hanger has to really take a look, and how are they going to play ball with some of the technology that they're acquiring, because the international market is important, and it is important to diversify, especially when you have a product like a Coapt that is a niche of a niche. So just some basic numbers is like roughly 20%, and it could be less, of all amputations is an upper extremity amputation. And most of those are partial fingers. So like when we had Chris Baschek on and Joel Soberg on as well, or Jeff Solberg on as well, partial hands. And so the reality is it's a niche within a niche in a niche, so not everybody's going to get electric types of prostheses and such. So it's an interesting, I would think that you would want to maximize market share, but if you have a technology that's only yours, it's a great way to not only lower your cost for providing the device, but actually provide the device, which runs that money through your hands multiple times. So it's a great question. I'll be very curious to see what happens. I mean, in your experience, not necessarily an O&P, what do you see people do when they do acquisition of some pretty incredible technology?
I don't know. It really depends. And it depends on what you consider your market to be. Not even what business you're in. What do you think your business is, and how do you see yourselves? If you see yourself as the world's greatest technology company, like kind of like Apple and Google, these guys, like, we have a mission to, organize all the world's information, or to be the best device company in the world, or to get your eyeballs or rent your eyeballs, for every moment you're awake, and then some, these companies tend to kind of have these very more absolutist kind of goals. And because of that, they'll buy features, or maybe even teams, right? So maybe they'll buy a team, not even care about the revenue, but care about how that feature incorporates into their next hardware platform. Or, they'll buy companies just for getting a team that can do the better retinal scanning on the phone, whatever, those kind of guys. And then they tend to like keep it for themselves and integrate it into a larger product offering. Game studios are an example where, traditionally game studios have been buying companies to strengthen the whole platform, the Xbox, the PlayStation, because they make the money off of course, being the bigger network with the more accessible games. And the logic used to be that if I would have 500 games and you would have 200, I'm going to make $1 billion more in selling my platform, if you will. And now people are saying more like, oh, wait a minute, there's all these PC users. We can just sell the game, port it, and make money off of those guys too. So it just also changes over time, depending, even in like a really competitive, cutthroat business like games. So it really does depend. And in this case, I mean, I always think, spreading costs about as many people as possible is much more kind of the way to go. So I would always advise companies to say, like, can we develop this as an independent solution? Because yes, there's one thing of vertically integrating it, but if we vertically integrate it and build out this technology, we could actually have more tendrils throughout this industry. We can not only make money if people walk out of a hangar store, but also if they walk into someone else's store, we make money. So to me, that would always be the bigger approach, the better idea. Let's make money off of every person. If we become the standard interface for all the myoelectric prostheses in the world, that's very exciting. That would be a really exciting kind of market to dominate that market and to dominate the niche, and you might maybe even dominate it forever, right?
Yeah.
If you're saying it's a niche of a niche of a niche,
yeah,
and then you'd be the operating like the operating system for that niche. Well, then I said like that's much more powerful than just having this as a hanger product or just to see this as a way to, we get. We make, 10 grand off of a myoelectric prosthesis. Let's find out how to make like a recurring revenue segment off of the maintenance or whatever, or the software. I think this is much more attractive long-term to see it as a product extension. But it also depends how companies are organized and how they reward themselves. Let's say if it's a family-held business, it's going to think a little bit different about the future than if it's a company that has to show quarterly profits. If it has investors on board, well, any kind of subscription revenue is going to be really exciting for them, whereas if they're publicly traded, maybe having maybe taking this into their like AI play, building 5 companies together and then using it as we have the AI of prostheses might actually be more valuable to them and just the valuation rather than, extracting any kind of significant revenue off of this. So there's a lot of things at stake here. I mean, there's personalities and stuff like this. And this seems like it has actual value for the customer. So I think that kind of customer-driven innovation, if you move to a new area and you could, pick some local clinic, some chain that's local and looks really good, or Hanger, but that Hanger has this prosthesis software and they have the knowledge of fitting it, and they're the experts in this, that's also really valuable. I think when people are, I'll go to them because I trust them wherever I move in America, for example.
Right. Well, I think that's an interesting point that you bring up, like rolling up stuff like software wise. And I think you just kind of sparked like what else can the technology be used for? So if you take a look at some of the latest codes that got approved, obviously the Coapt got approved for upper extremity, but what about some of this other stuff? Does it actually apply to maybe some of the exoskeleton stuff, the lower extremity bracing, upper extremity bracing, that sort of thing? And now you're sitting on, maybe it's not the hardware side that is important to you, but it's actually the signal processing and that sort of thing. The software side of things becomes more interesting when about intellectual property around what do you actually do with different body signals. And I think that's, I think you hit the nail on the head with that. Is it's not just the hardware. This is 15 years or maybe even more of looking at what patterns people move in, and there's a lot of value there, especially when somebody else bringing something to market.
Exactly. And if you look at, like, for example, what's going on with cobots, right? We want workers to collaborate with cobots and work next to them. Right? A cobot is a safer robot, essentially.
Yeah.
It doesn't just whack at 40 kilometers an hour, an arm somewhere and needs to be kept in a cage. No, it can work alongside people. We're working together with sensors, and we're working together in a much more sensor-driven environment. On top of that, we know the exoskeleton thing is really interesting for the military. It's really interesting for a lot of, mining and other kind of really, really heavy on the body kind of industries. So how do you control these things? What are you going to do? Is a joystick all the time? Maybe, but there could be smarter ways of controlling these devices. And if you could stitch together the myoelectric sensing /control /development IDE kind of ecosystem, you could also make money off of that software for all those other devices where humans interact with robots. And if you look at it, that kind of thing, a human machine interaction way, then it could be really interesting. In a car plant, you could maybe want to do this. I'm not saying that really focused on that because it's very far away from where they are. But if they could just sell that same software to the Hanger employee, to the Hanger customers, to new customers, and to Toyota, that could be a very, very valuable thing.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. It definitely gives Hanger the opportunity to diversify into other markets that are not in orthotics and prosthetics, and you see that with like a company like Ottobock that not only delves into like wheelchairs and other rehab stuff, but they also are in some of the automotive stuff, German automotive companies, doing specific things that interact with the body for that, and they make a lot of money off of it. And so it's a great way to de-risk and diversify your portfolio. So I think that's a great point, Joris.
Okay, cool. And then I agree. I think I'm really interested to see this, and really interested also to see what this market is going on. So, okay, so other stuff you want to talk about? Well, what have you been up to?
Yeah, well, AMS was a great show for me. Like, it was great to, and that's additive manufacturing strategies for somebody that didn't listen to those few podcasts. And that's a event. Well, I'll let you explain it, Joris, and then I'll hop back in.
AMS essentially, it's an event in New York, end of January, beginning of February, couple of days, 3 days. It's about strategies in additive manufacturing, like 3D printing. So it's about, like, if you would like to start a startup that relies heavily on the technology, or you want to cater to the market, sell the market, be in the market, that's a really good event for you. So, if you're an O&P practitioner that wants to use additive, then IOPA or the Academy, all these events are probably better for you. But if you're really deeply into additive, it's a really good event, I think, to look at things from, like, kind of the helicopter view kind of way.
Yeah, and so, like, when I was there and watched many of the sessions, a couple of the sessions were very interesting to me. From a contract manufacturer side, if I was to take off all my other hats, right? I'm a partner in Advanced 3D, and it's a small contract manufacturer, but we do some really, really neat things. We help people design, we help people 3D print. And the way that I describe it is it just kind of feels like, hey, we've got the skis at the top of the mountain and we're getting ready to go down. And we've got a couple options to make. Do we keep on bootstrapping on the financial side of things? Where can we look for some other money where we have some stuff on our roadmap that we just can't accomplish because we've made some decisions that we're not going to leverage ourselves? Or do we look for an investor, angel investor, whatever it is, to inject some capital and get some of this stuff moving, knowing that it's a good thing for our business? And one of the, you had a couple VC people, private equity guys on there, and it sticks with me because they pretty much said, if you can do it without us, that's the best way to do it, which I thought was very open, honest. But then they were like, hey, if you need us, you need us. Just know that it's going to be a grind. And but then you had Jenny Chen come on in the medical track, which was really amazing. And she said, for some of these small companies, there is funding out there, and there are different mechanisms that you can get funding. You just have to get a little creative. And so one of the things that I'm particularly excited about is the Orthotics and Prosthetics Foundation for Education and Research. They have gotten a couple fairly sizable sums of money to distribute out in the form of grants and micro grants. And so there's a lot of options there. So if you're a clinician, a student, or a small business that is looking to do something in the orthotic and prosthetic space, this might be a great way for you to look at. But then there's other things where you have options to, it could be a competition, could be a startup thing where you pitch something. There's a lot of those that happen around the United States, really around the world, where you can get in front of people and talk about your business. And so that's one of the things that I think I'm going to start to be more intentional about is, and it's not just about the money, it's about the network. And I think you tell this all the time, is your network is really your net worth. Who will trust you? What's that?
I have not said that, but I think it's really important to know people.
But you demonstrate it every single time. Yeah. Like when I just remember, so this is a great example. I saw you interacting with another person, and you're like, "Hey, who can I introduce you to? I can take you to whoever you want right now," and that is leveraging, who with somebody that wants something or needs something or just wants an introduction, and that is, I think, super important. And so but it's not always about just the funding, right? It's some of the connections and who knows who, and these degrees of separation that, you're just one meeting away from meeting somebody that could literally change how you do things. And I think that is really, really important. And so yes, there's funding in some of these mechanisms, but there's also people that will mentor you. They might have gone down the road before you. They may have some ideas. There's some inroads. There's some other people that they can introduce you to that you can do business with. And I think that's something that I'm just going to be more conscious of.
Okay, that's cool, man.
Moving forward.
It sounds like cool. It sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, I think it'll be a really different way of doing it, but I think it's good to point out that there are different things than just dilutive funding, and there are different mechanisms out there. And maybe you've never raised or talked to a VC or whatever. Do prepare yourself, because they're very different creatures, let's say, and other investors work very, very differently as well. But I think trying that stuff and learning that new skill, I think it'd be really, really very valuable. I think.
Yeah, and so I think that is what I'm excited about. Moving forward with advanced 3D is it's become, we're just trying to be more intentional about what we do. Yes, we've got some machines, but the real thing that I think that we do that's special is how we can put it all together to get you something that's manufacturable. So regardless of materials, regardless of printer or what have you, we have a good sense of not only the design side, but the manufacturing side.
Yeah, I think that's a really specific. I mean, I remember when we were at Shapeways, for example, we could never do orientation of parts. We couldn't. We were just set up to just spit the parts in and nest them as efficiently as possible. And we had a lot of parts, so we could mesh much more efficiently than if you had very few parts. Nesting is, by the way, putting the part in the printer in the most optimal way. But we cared about volume, right? So we can make it cheaper for everyone. That was our whole thing, right? Shape was in the beginning. Of course, now it's a very different animal. But at the beginning, it was just like, okay, let's get a lot of parts in. Let's figure out how to orient them all the best way possible. And then we just do everything we can to make the whole technology cheaper. And then more people could print more things. Ta-da! Right? I mean, later I worked for Materialize, where we were much more like hands-on and giving people advice and looking at how you put that part to get the best result. Now, of course, you're never going to get that low pricing if that's your attitude, if the parts are so high touch. But even in those pretty competitive services, I think, there's a very different approach. And I think if you look at all these service businesses, you've got Endeavor 3D, which is like, we're doing a contract manufacturing. That's what we do, Meanwhile, we have Centavia, and Centavia is saying, no, we make heat management solutions for defense. Basically, they have the same kind of business, but if you look at how they do their business and how who they're talking to, it's completely different, right? And other people saying, no, we're a service. Just throw any part over the wall and we'll take care of it. So I think how you position yourself, how you see yourself, and the specific way you treat customers and set up, there's a huge difference. I mean, you might as well say like, printing different, or books are all different, even though they're all the same. You know what I mean? It's a very, very different way of orienting. I think, I think what I like about advanced 3D as a business is that you're completely, you could do an idea to production for prosthetics. And I don't think other people can, right? All these other businesses we just talked about, excellent services or excellent contract manufacturers, but they don't know how to O&P, if you will, right? They don't know what's important. They don't know where that part, no, that's risky. I wouldn't print that. And you guys will say that because you're like, no, there's way too much load on that part. Or that part makes more sense if we use a carving machine or whatever. That kind of logic, and you understand that. So I think that to me is the real benefit of really that inside knowledge of that industry.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think you're absolutely right. Like, and there is more of a trend to the contract manufacturers it's a race to the bottom. How can I make your part for the cheapest? Get you out. Hey, Blair.
What just happened?
So Blair just popped in.
Did.
Yeah. And who's Blair?
Oh, man. Anything. Blair is the CEO of Coapt.
Oh my God. How did you do this, Brett? Well, congratulations, Blair. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, Brent texted me here a few minutes ago and said, And it's funny, Brent, it's, am I truly available for you? Yeah, I am. I'm here. Happy to chat with you.
Oh, that's nice, man. Okay. So talk to us about this deal. First off, it must be really, how long have you guys been working on this business? And now all of a sudden to exit it, it's going to be, it must have been a pretty intense couple of weeks for you guys, right?
Weeks, maybe a couple of years is probably a little more accurate. Well, so let's go back to the beginning. I'm not exiting. Although the traditional financial sort of the business ownership exit, yes, is indeed true. But I'm sticking around and going to really be integrated in a deeper way with what goes forward with Coapt as we know it, and just sort of the bigger, better Coapt with our new partnership. So the Coapt, let's see, was founded in 2012, 13 years ago, almost 13 years ago exactly. We took us a little over a year to get product launch on the market, of course, spun up. And we were started as I won't say traditional, but one might say a spin-off or a technology spin-out from research and work we had been doing at what was then the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago, RIC, now known as the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. So myself and some other co-founding partners were academic researchers, scientists, engineers there, worked on this technology that what we know Coapt does as its bread and butter. We out-licensed that technology from the institution, from the hospital, and kicked off the company in 2012. Really turned that out into the product. The first product sale for Coapt was late in 2013. And that's with the rest is history, as they say.
Where is the value for Hanger in what Coapt does? What is it they're, from a Hanger perspective, what are they really buying? I mean, we know what you guys, I know already a whole 30 minutes, right? What do you guys do? I know nothing, right? If you're new to our podcast, I know nothing. But so what did Hanger buy? What are they really interested in? And what are they really interested in? And where's the value for them and their customers?
Yeah, I think a few things to answer that. Number one, our people. So we have a pretty strong team, both ourselves, and we have a subsidiary company, LTI, out in Boston. And the people that we have in both of those groups are just fantastically talented in the device engineering research in our space, or in O&P. These are individuals that know the industry, passionate about the industry. They understand that device development and technological enhancement, innovation, squarely rooted in this space is important. And so I think, number one, the talent is just immense. Nobody else has what we as these two companies have. We are squarely focused in a niche of upper extremity powered prosthetic devices. And I want to very quickly say, and this isn't a knock on anybody else, but we do not make anything that moves, right? So we don't make prosthetic hands, wrists, elbows. Lots of great people out there make those. There's a plethora of very capable, well-engineered prosthetic hands, wrists, elbows in the market. We don't do that. So primarily, you could peel back the layers, and from an engineering standpoint, we are an embedded systems and a machine learning algorithms company. So we're very good at making electronics, circuit boards, and specialty electronics that are designed for human wearable use. That's quite important. Making electronics for a circuit board that goes in a calculator is very different than a circuit board that walks around with somebody, just in its nature of design and production and everything that goes along with that. So we're very good at that. Our competencies from an engineering standpoint in O&P, in embedded systems specific for human wearable, and also the algorithm. So where we spun out, our early research was focused on what we'll describe as decoding neurological intent. So for upper limb powered prosthesis wearers, what they want that device to do. So this human machine interface, they can think about, they can intend for that prosthetic hand, wrist, elbow to do something. Our algorithms are specifically designed to take the biopotential, so measurements from the body, mostly muscle signals, and these are a mess of muscle signals in modern era, and we decode that using pattern recognition. This is a machine learning type of algorithm that's specifically tuned for upper limb amputees, and we turn those decoded informations into telling the prosthetic devices how to actuate. So all the way back to what does Hanger get from us? We are incredibly innovative in that we have a technology corner of the upper limb world that is very unique. And so it's advanced in the sense of neurological decoding for control of devices, period. You could extend what we do in a fundamental standpoint to powered orthotic devices, other areas of rehabilitation science and actuation. And so where they see us is well integrated with other acquisitions they have done. So let's look at Phil Auer, for example, fantastic engineering, clinical fabrication team. Their depth is incredible. What we add to them is something they don't have, which is a really high-tech electronic data processing, machine learning, AI set of resource. Long-winded, sorry about that, but feels fun to get all that out there.
No, but I think it makes a lot of sense. I think, and do you see do you think, because of course this is going to be new in the next couple of months, do you think you're going to become more of a, kind of a systems integrator for all the stuff going on and hang on all the products they want to be, or more kind of like a Microsoft Windows for prosthetic device control, if you will, or beyond prosthetics, more human machine interface for all sorts of stuff? Where do you think the main focus is going to be?
Yeah, I think on the near term, it's status quo. As is, we have a product line that has grown consistently year over year, and I think the engine we're now joined with helps us achieve more of that. So more of the same, and that's certainly a key focus of our people and our vision. Everything else you mentioned is, yes, an iron we have in the fire, and I think this new opportunity of partnership allows us to accelerate, invest in certain areas, partner with other entities that will allow us to really advance some of those ideas. So being a centralized command center of more advanced devices, look, we're not going backwards in technology or on the clock, and our vision is to be a group of people and a group of assets that works on that cutting edge, that bleeding edge of what's going to come out there. Are arms and legs and other devices going to need, like you say, kind of this Microsoft Windows idea? There are more things coming online that we're not going to make. Sensory feedback systems, implantable sensing systems, the devices themselves become more advanced. So we do see ourselves well positioned to be a bit of a systems integrator in that sense.
Okay, that sounds like super valuable. So I know you've been waiting to answer lots of questions. So.
Yeah, well, so before Joris was completely stunned that Blair came in, we were talking about, and we were talking from my perspective, Advanced 3D, we're a small company that was founded, 2-3 years ago, and we're on this path of we're doing well, we're profitable, we've made some decisions not to be a leveraged company, but now we're also to the point of boy, it would be nice to have some of the toys to make some of the things come to life that's on our roadmap. How do you, as a founder, for the last 13, 14 years, navigate that? And then make it obviously a decision where you have definitely more options or an engine like what you described to help some of those roadmap stuff come alive. So I guess more from a selfish standpoint of Advanced 3D is we're navigating this now, and it's we feel like I was telling Joris, the skis are at the top of the mountain and we're pointing them down, and we're we have a couple options to go, and we just don't know where to go. So I'm just wondering how you navigated that over the last 12, 13 years.
Yeah. And Brent, I feel you. I'm laughing because I know the feeling so well. And there's really two big parts of that. When I joked about, having a busy last couple of years, about 2 or 3 years ago was when we really started to truly believe that was the next necessary step for us, is that all of the things we had on the roadmap from the early days were somewhat nebulous, and we would pursue and execute on things that made sense. that maintained profitability, that allowed for growth, and the joke is, you start the company with a business plan and you immediately tear it up, right? Well, that's quite true. But somewhere along the way, the nebulous roadmap became a lot more defined and achievable, where you think, we kind of do know what we're doing. We've had a number of years under our belt for the legal and the regulatory and the IP and the marketing, and you think, okay, this is a real business. So that starts to hit you in a difficult way. Some days you're like, ooh, this is a real business. It's kind of scary. So the roadmap becomes more clear, and then there becomes a little bit more anxiety about that. So how do you execute that instead of just saying, well, we'll take it as it comes, or I shouldn't say that. That sounds a little loose. Effectively, in the early years, you modify the roadmap as necessary, right? So it has to be a little bit agile. And that's the whole thing about a founded small company. You can stay agile. But that tipping point of where your skis are at the top of the mountain, that's the scary thing. How do I find the right team to ski with, right? Or group to go forward with? What are those resources to really execute a more secure, a more real plan? And that's where we were about 2 years ago. So that set us out into some decision making. Do you seek outside investment? We've never had outside investment. We've never taken on debt. We've gone slowly because of that. It really took us, let's call it 10 years to get to a point where we say, okay, this is a healthy company. Our financials are very healthy. Now we have the ability to be a little bit in the driver's seat of what's next for us. So yeah, you evaluate the options. We take on outside investment. Do we look for groups that are rolling up? Do we look for a strategic partnership? Who's going to help us with the vision? And it allowed us to, say what we wanted a little bit in these discussions. So it did take a little bit of time as we got out there and we talked to different parties, evaluated them. Right, this is a two-way street, of course. So we wanted to do what was right by our team, our people, our technologies, our vision. So I know exactly how you're feeling right now.
Yeah, no, well, I appreciate that. I mean, and that's good to know. And I think there's also, I think what else is interesting is, right, people see the news and it's like, oh, Coapt sold to Hanger. It's just an overnight success. And that's not the case. It's been a slow burn, slow grind, and slow is okay. And when it comes to some of this medical stuff, slow and steady is going to win the race. And it's probably a lot slower than what you expect. So those are some of the perspectives that I'm at least making myself feel better about the process.
I love that you say that slow is okay. And I'm going to rip that off of you. I have a lot of chats with people, and especially in our space, in our field, slow is okay. And I go further and say slow is necessary, because too often we young founders and startups, or anybody that's looking to achieve success in something new or novel in this space, we're influenced so much by what goes on in just regular everyday everyone else's social media. And you can look at companies that grow, they get investment, and in order to get investment, you might need to promise investors things that are going to happen within 2 or 3 years that just in our space are not possible. So not only is slow okay, slow is probably necessary for success here.
Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering a little bit about how you see, we're seeing all these electronic devices. You kind of talked about this already. We're seeing now cell phones are getting much more powerful. We're seeing sensors getting much more powerful. We're seeing this exoskeleton market, which is really exciting. How do you see the interplay between the consumer electronics market and O&P essentially? Because it used to be that there's completely two different silos. But you guys are one of the first companies really that are integrating all this stuff along with some other ones. Yeah, how do you see that? Is O&P going to borrow a lot more from established consumer electronics? Is it going to play a lot better with your iPhone? How do you see that kind of future?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that dance has been ever present in our space. It just sort of wanes in and out a little bit. That's been top of my mind for my 20 years in this field. And it's always that understanding. We borrow from the consumer marketplace where we can. We benefit where we can. We try to influence where we can. I do think there's a new point where the one interesting thing that may not be top of mind for a lot of people is that some of the tools used to develop some of these electronics, the software systems, the applications, the back end, the connected health platforms, the AI, could go on. What's really nice about a lot of the direction of consumer widgets is how they're being developed. And where we're borrowing a lot of, or where we're getting a lot of benefit is in just being able to use tools. So it's not so much that the physical devices themselves are physically integrated. It's that the way we can accelerate our own development because of the development tools that have, been advanced by a lot of those consumer devices. Now, I also think that things like communication protocols or inter-device communication protocols and digital networks and IoT and all of these other buzzwords we talk about, those are also becoming more, easier to develop interconnections with. And so I look at our next platform that's under prototype development here and talk about the power in it. So it's being built with, multiple core, all these power of sensors and processing and connectivity that I would have never imagined possible 5-6 years ago. Most of the chips we're using are, from mobile devices or wearable watches and things like that. So there's definitely a key or a tighter benefit now than ever before between consumer electronics and what we're going to be able to do and see.
And another thing, I think Brent mentioned this earlier when we're talking, is that in a lot of cases, the O&P market isn't very international. Like service companies tend to be local, but also even device companies tend to have more of a market in one area or one regional area, right? Manufacturing companies definitely a lot of times have a regional focus. There's only very few companies, very large ones, that have a truly international. And even they're based kind of in Europe and the States, essentially, not even necessarily Latin America, not this emerging Asia with hundreds of millions of people in it. Do you see the market get more international? And do you see you guys having an opportunity also becoming more international, maybe saying, hey, do we sell to the Philippines? Or, hey, we don't really have anything set up in Germany. Do you see that's a possibility as well?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think this is key for us as an opportunity for growth and expansion and really helping getting our technology to benefit a lot of areas we're not currently in. We have over the years, again, kind of slowly developed some international distribution partnerships. So we are in a number of international areas, but I think the penetration of that, the market awareness, that's where there's work to be done. We've been sort of busy running on our own, the resource that we've been able to self-fund. So our team is only as big as we've been able to reinvest our earnings, if you will. And so we have had to, in the past, kind of pick and choose where we want to do that. Every new international opportunity is a significant jump in the resource to manage the distribution channel, the support channel, education. This tends to be a new type of thing for a lot of these markets. So there's a heavy resource lift on each one of those. And I'm looking forward to what's going forward and what's going to be possible.
So we can't go too far though. Joris and I talk a lot about additive manufacturing, and you guys actually very early on in some of your kits really embraced additive manufacturing for creating some of your prototypes and even some of the dummies and that sort of thing. Can you just share a little bit about that, how you guys landed there? But then what do you see as the future as we're starting to integrate? I mean, I know that we've done some shoulder disarticulations, we're doing cable routing and all that stuff as far as into the upper extremity. And so you get this really sleek looking prosthesis, but specifically for your stuff, because there is quite a few parts, I think that clean look is important. Where do you see it going? So it's kind of the history of you guys going into additive manufacturing, but then where do you see some of that stuff going?
Yeah, I love this because really I'd break that down into two areas. One is in the actual widget we make, right? So the widget we make has plastic parts. It has fabrication aids. It has enclosures. It has little protectors on certain cables because of the nature of what we do. And the classic engineering trade-off of when you are at the volume of where does injection molding make sense versus, in the past, it was even less options in additive manufacturing. So to date, and especially in the early years, it made sense for us sort of economically to look at additive manufacturing for our product enclosures, our fabrication aids, demonstration tools, so things we make like evaluation units, or if we go to a conference, how are we demonstrating, how are we making a handheld thing that we might make 20 of those? So obviously we've leveraged that in a big way. Prototyping, we're an engineering group. We need to get this stuff in our hands. So very classically, we use the additive manufacturing in a lot of those classic verticals. A whole other side of this is, as you mentioned, well, where's our technology meet with new items in clinical care? So sockets, right? Really, you guys are very versed in this and do awesome work. Wire routing, electrode placement. So we make systems with electrodes, and each one of those has a little mounting hole. We love the future concept of saying, hey, the digital workflow should just include what we do. One of the beauties about the type of electronic technology we have is that there's a lot less specificity on where the electrodes should land on the body. You could take a scan and just have the software plan out where the electrodes should go and pre-route them. You could have additive manufacturing build in the wire channels, the holes, so that the mounting of all the electrodes is sort of sight unseen. We love that idea. I think that's upon us now. So there's that whole camp of where we see additive manufacturing clinical care, and the intersection of our stuff is really cool. I think not only can we make it look awesome, but as far as saving time clinically, taking some of the guesswork out of it, taking some of the education out of it, these are systems that should just be put on and ready to go. That's what the benefit of the machine learning is. So it's a big part of what we do. We, again, joke that we don't make anything that moves, but we do have mechanical engineers on staff, and they're doing a lot of SolidWorks to print.
Yeah, then one thing I'm wondering, like the myoelectric stuff has always been kind of like the Rolls Royce of this. Non-affordable for a lot of people, and even first world economies and stuff, and definitely not affordable for like a lot of people in developing countries. So, are you seeing price points come down? Or do you expect like there's going to be some magical thing, soft robotics, cheaper sense, I don't know what, to really make these things much more accessible? Or do you think it is going to stay for a while longer, kind of this kind of gold-plated solution for those who can afford it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there is some progress there. I'm not that well equipped to answer this in the broadest sense. And just by sense of definition, myoelectric, when the field says myoelectrics, we often throw in everything from the devices themselves, right? The myoelectric hands, these power actuated devices that are controllable by myoelectric inputs, right? That's a whole camp of myoelectrics. There is an economic element to this because of a lot of those devices. The cost of manufacture at the volumes that are produced for our field do dictate some of the economics with that. I do see some interesting activity where device manufacturers are looking to, I think, see their devices used in other areas, industrial robotics, industrial automation, human interface testing, and that's good. Maybe that in the long run does have some helpful impact on the cost of myoelectrics in our space. When it comes to the actual myoelectronic electronics, so the electrodes, the processing system, maybe. I think we're on the cusp of some change here. So in this last cycle of coding, you may be aware that there was a new code established, L6700, that effectively covers and addresses what the Coapt technology is. So neurological intent decoding in a myoelectric system. We're not quite sure what the piecewise, stepwise impact of that will be in overall economics of this space.
I think that's an interesting point. And Joris, I think it's also important to note that when we're talking about any of this stuff, we're talking about a very, very small volume and a highly regulated. So you have batteries close to the skin, you have things interacting with the skin. And so when you look at some of these devices and you say, well, that wouldn't cost much to manufacture. Well, you're right, but it costs you a lot to get through the regulations and all that stuff specifically for the US. And so when you're talking about those styles of small volumes, along with the regulation burden, it starts adding up very, very quickly, all the biocompatibility stuff. And so I mean, I don't envy that, like any of that stuff with the too much regulation where you're actually interacting with the body and such. I can't imagine some of the bills that you've had to pay over the years to get some of that stuff going, and then go back to the drawing board because something didn't pass or whatever, and then have to pay it again to test it. That is, I think, and I don't know that it's just unique to the American market. I think the European market's also pretty difficult in some ways, but these upper extremity devices, and you see it kind of glorified on the news, $120,000 prostheses, whatever it is, and it's like, and this guy in his basement created it for $5. Well, the guy in the basement is not using technology. He's not regulated. He doesn't have insurance. There's nobody certified involved. Are some of these things super expensive? Yeah, but I don't think nobody's going out and buying a yacht with this stuff right now. The market's just way small, and so I think that's the biggest thing when I hear the cost stuff, especially in the news. It's just a really difficult thing to put a number on, because people to do it the right way is expensive, and that's just it. And somebody has to bear that cost, and it's the insurance companies and the companies that are developing themselves, and they're having to dance with, are we actually going to, what testing and how much are we going to pay? How much does that eat into our overall margins? And then wrapping that up into a price that makes sense is a difficult thing. So that's just me on my soapbox a little bit with the upper extremity stuff, but it's I can't imagine all the stuff that has to be gone through for the financial stuff. And then when you take a look at your actual, margins, it's like, man, we spent a lot for a little, a lot of times,
Yeah, that's spot on, to be honest. And I mean, there's so many things, and this goes back to why it's taken us even so long to get where we are. It's because the earnings are modest, even with the price points where they are, and we constantly have to reinvest in, keeping our engineers happy and our clinical staff and our education and support. These are all important pillars, because it's one thing to build something or borrow parts and pieces and get it out there on a cheap sense, but we really can't do a disservice by not supporting or not having something released without the right amount of supporting documentation, educational materials, you name it. And that's a big investment as well, continuous investment, awareness, teaching courses for credit. These are constant things that, cost the company money in order for it to be a successful deployment and successful functional outcomes of the technology. We can make it cheap and just leave it on the sidewalk for someone to get, but boy, oh boy, it wouldn't work very well. And that's a big part of the equation too.
Yeah, we totally solved this before he came on, because then the obvious thing we thought of was like for the office workers, all these people working for cobots, people just generally interacting with the devices. That market is huge. Just everybody working and requiring any kind of human machine, robot arm / exoskeleton interaction. Yeah, this kind of like a good platform for keeping people safe and allowing them to efficiently interact with the robots that surround them, it could be worth a lot more in the future than it has been for the last couple of decades.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. We have had to, I happen to have I don't know how well this is, I'll read this out for people who don't see it, but our vision statement, this is on a nice Coapt mug, it's got my cold coffee in it. We've had to have a laser focus, and again, I'll show that. So our vision statement has been human-machine interfaces that benefit humans. And so for us, we've had to make sure we could focus our resources on doing our thing in technology space, in the machine learning space, that had a direct benefit for people. And I see that. So if the benefit category is keeping somebody safe in a factory, that's great. But what that really has said we don't do is use our developments for other things that are fun, gaming or computer interfacing or driving a car around or flying a rocket around. Those are cool and awesome for sure. As an engineer, I can geek out about all that stuff like anyone. But we've had to have a relatively laser focus on doing what we do to benefit people. And it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, our vision statement that, hey, there's a lot of human-machine interface stuff out there, but ours is actually intended to benefit people.
And that last part, humans benefiting humans, like what does our technology do? And then how do we leverage that with a bigger engine? I think it all goes along with and supports what we said. So thank you so much for coming on last second, last minute, and hopping on and sharing. And then I think we'd love to have you come back on and we can talk a little bit more about history of Coapt and that sort of thing. Yeah. And then we can check in, in a few months and just how are things going? And hopefully you've got a couple other things that you can share with us, and then we can go from there. So this was great, encouraging to me too, as a small new company.
Well, good. I hope so. And honestly, anybody else that's going to listen and hear that and be in our position, it is exciting. It is good. It's not a leap. It's a fun departure. It's a quasi departure. It's really sort of, hey, I get to do more of what I've worked so hard on, and that's what I think a lot of us really strive for. So that's where I'm at today.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's an interesting point. When you talked about, Hanger, and your first thing is it's the people that work with us. That is our asset. Yes, we do hardware. Yes, we've got some software, but our people made it. I think the other thing that a lot of companies, and I don't think they're overlooking it anymore, but somebody that like you that's been in the business for 12, 13 and longer, as your PhD stuff and all that happened, is you have learned a lot about the O&P market, and the knowledge that you've collected is super valuable with the larger scope of what's been successful. And so you also see that with a company like Proteer buying out Filament Innovations. Mike started his company with Filament Innovations in 2014, 2015, got into the prosthetic market a little bit and has understand what does it take to sell into it? How much hand-holding does it do? What does the customer service look like? What does excellence look like in providing that? And that, as a leader, as a CEO, is a valuable thing to the acquiring company because they have a lens that other people haven't been looking through. So I think that's also, why I'm excited for you, but also for Hanger, is that they're going to have a perspective that you bring that is not related to hardware, software, the stuff that you've built, but it's the knowledge that you've gained over the years of experience dealing with this interesting little niche of a group of people called prosthetics and orthotics.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. It's funny. I hope they appreciate our narrow or our very specific or unique purview on this. In the early days, myself, my co-founder, we would say some of the best things we did in that slowness was to talk with our eyes and ears. Right. And that's advice I've given other young or other startups or co-founders is you can learn a lot about how you should be, about where you should be, things you don't want to do, things you do want to do by just kind of observing and listening and seeing people interact. And taking the time to do that really helps you position who you need to be, what's your identity, and where's your value going to land in the space. So, we try, it's ironic today because I've yapped so much, but I didn't used to talk this much. Used to listen a lot more. And I will. That's my commitment.
One other non-serious question, but maybe a serious question. When is it time that you go from like a very casual thing, like when you go to the academy meetings or the AOPA, to where you actually have to put a sport coat on? Like, I don't own a sport coat. I don't know that I will ever own a sport coat. I own some hoodies. Everybody that's getting acquired, some of my friends and such, I'm like, bro, what happened to you, man? You're in a sport coat now.
That's that's a chicken and egg. I don't know if it's like you put that on to try to peacock yourself, or is it more of like, okay, I'm being taken seriously. I should I don't know which it is, to be honest. Well, okay. When I started, I didn't mind like shirt and tie. I sort of felt that was fun. I grew up around, let's say my family, and my father was a good role model in the fact that, you go to work, you be presentable, and you wore a shirt and tie. And then when he wasn't doing that, he wasn't wearing that. I always did that. And the ties sort of have gone away over the years for our generation. There's that joke saying, you look good, you feel good, or you feel good, you look good, whatever. Something like that. I don't know. That is a great question. But Brent, if I see you in a sport coat, I'm going to know things.
Yeah, you're going to know things for sure. When I saw yours in a sport coat, I was like, holy moly, you must be leading AMS or something.
No, I wear like a coat like 10 days, or a suit like 10 days a year. so all the times I'm just, just behind the Zoom, just like in the Zoom mines, like everyone else, standing at home in shorts.
Wow, Joris, did we go off the rails or what?
Yeah, no, we did go off the rails a little bit, but I think it's a wonderful podcast generally. And then, I think we had a wonderful time. Great that Blair could just jump in with us. This is really, 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 really great. So thank you for coming so much. Thank you so much for coming, Blair.
Thank you, guys.
And thank you for being here as always, Brent.
Yeah, this was good. And it was a good surprise. So glad we were able to make it all happen.
And thank you for listening to another episode of the Orthotics and Prosthetics podcast. Have a great day.
And that's a wrap for another episode of the Prosthetics and Orthotics podcast. A special thanks to Blair Lock from Coapt for sharing his experience and journey with us. If you enjoyed this episode, please kindly leave us a review. That would mean the world to us. If you want to catch up with us, please join us on LinkedIn and give us a shout out via direct message. And until next time, we'll catch you on the next episode.